Alrighty, welcome to your Midreshet Moriah monthly message for Cheshvan. I am Zvi Ron, Rav Ron, and this is my message for the month of Cheshvan. Generally, people like to say, oh, Cheshvan is a bitter month of Cheshvan, there's no holidays in it and all that. But we know that that is not the case. There are a few holidays in the month of Cheshvan. These holidays are not celebrated today, but originally we had these holidays. In Megillat Ta'anit is a list, and Rashi says that this book was written before the rest of the Gemara was written. That's why it's called Megillat Ta'anit. It was the only Megillah they had. It's a list of all of the special occasions for the Jewish people to celebrate, days on which you're not allowed to fast. So there are all these, what we call today, minor holidays. With the Churban of the second Beit HaMikdash, then that was considered so horrible and so awful and so tragic that it overwhelmed all of these little holidays, and therefore they are no longer in practice today and mostly forgotten. However, in Megillat Ta'anit, we actually have a few holidays listed for the month of Cheshvan. Now what people like to do is they say, you know what, every month has a certain kind of characteristic based on the holidays in that month. You say, oh, Adar, that's Mishenichnas Adar, Marbi Ben Simcha, and it's Nafochu, and things turn around, yeah. And Nisan is the Geula, and Bnei Yisrael got out, and then the Geula will come again, and Tishrei is the time of Din, and making a close connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Elul is, doing tshuva, getting ready, things like this. Very good. So let's now look at Cheshvan and see about the holidays in Cheshvan, what they have to tell us about the holiday of the month, and what is the nature of this month. So there's two major holidays from Cheshvan that I'll talk to you about. The first one is from the 25th of Cheshvan. In Megillat Ta'anit, this was a holiday because the Jewish people settled a place called Shamron. Now that means the Mountain of Shamrock. What is this? The Megillat Ta'anit tells us that when the Jewish people came back from Bavel, they wanted to live in Israel. However, the people who were living there, who moved in while the Jews were in Galut, were not very excited about having Jews come in and say, oh, well, it's our turn now, you get out, we're back. They did not want that. These people were the Shomronim, the Samaritans, right, who were put in when the Aseret HaShvatim were kicked out. Then Melech Ashur brought in these Shomronim and they settled Israel. And they're not Jewish. Now, when the Jewish people came back, it was very, very difficult for them to find a place to live in Israel. And they tried and it was very difficult. However, after a while, they built a small walled city in Shur Shamron, which is in the heart of the Samaritan area. That's what it's called, Shamron. That's Samaria. That's where the Shomronim lived, the Samaritans lived. They built a small walled city there. And once that worked, then they built towns next to that walled city, and more towns until that entire area was settled. And to celebrate the settlement of that area, they made a holiday on the 25th of Cheshvan. Now what does this tell us? I don't know yet, but let's look at another holiday and then we'll figure it out. On the 23rd of Cheshvan, there was another holiday that was celebrated, which is the day the Jewish people, the Maccabim, removed the Serega from the Beit HaMikdash. Now, what was the Serega? Now, when the Greeks, when Antiochus wanted to defile the Beit HaMikdash in the times of the Maccabim, he sent, according to Sefer Maccabim, an old Athenian, and he says, listen, I'm putting you in charge. I want you to defile this Beit Mikdash. So you know what he did? He built a structure, and they brought prostitutes there, and they would have prostitution activities in this particular area, which had a lattice work around it, which was called the Serega. This was this place where they did this disgusting, vile tumah to desecrate the Beit Mikdash. Now, when the Maccabim finally took over that part of Israel in their battles against the Greeks, they got to the Beit HaMikdash. And before they were mataher the Beit Mikdash, and before they were looking for that little jug of oil and anything like that, the first thing they did was, they say, we are tearing down this Serega, this thing that symbolizes the disgusting, vile tumah that the Greeks have brought into the Beit Mikdash. The day they tore down the Serega, after it was up for 3 years, more than 3 years, that was made a little bit of a holiday, a small holiday, on the 23rd of Mar Cheshvan. Let us now understand what these two holidays have in common, and therefore what Mar Cheshvan is all about. What these two holidays have in common is as follows. Both of them are presenting the Jewish people with a certain kind of a status quo. And this status quo, that's just the way it is, and that's the way it's been for quite some time. The Samaritans having settled this area. There's no Jewish people in this area. That's just the way it is. What do the Jewish people do when they come? They say, listen, we're not going to give up. We're not going to accept this situation. This is not okay. And they try and they try and they try until, boom, they settle that Samaritan heartland. Same thing with the Serega. The Greeks defile. They said, this is it. This is a vile thing that they did. It's been that way for years. The Maccabim say, this is unacceptable. And they switch it around. So, what Mar Cheshvan is therefore about conceptually is this idea of not accepting the way things are and working to change that reality. Now you also even see how that works agriculturally, because what happens in Mar Cheshvan, I mean in Israel, that's what this is all based on. That's when the rain comes down. In other words, you're planting things, new seeds, new crops, and they are now growing in this month. Now I'll tell you that this power of Mar Cheshvan, in other words, changing a status quo and not accepting that status quo as binding, you also find a little bit in a negative way. Because in Sefer Malachim, we also see something that happened during the month of Mar Cheshvan, and that is Yeravam ben Nevat. Yeravam ben Nevat, when they broke off from Rechavam, and they made their own Mamlechet Yisrael, and he did not want the Jewish people to go back to the Beit HaMikdash on the regalim, on the holidays. So he says, I'm going to invent basically a new pseudo place for people to go to, and that is the two golden calves that he set up. And he also says, I'm going to make a new holiday. He took the holidays from the month of Tishrei, being the 7th month, and he shifted them into the month of the 8th month, it says, which is the month of Mar Cheshvan. So you see, he also, that's the power of Mar Cheshvan. You say, listen, this is the status quo. I'm not going to accept it. It can be changed. Now, it could be used for the powers of good, or it could be used for the powers of evil. And Yeravam ben Nevat used it for evil. He says, look, I don't care. This is the way the holidays have been from time immemorial. That's what it says in the Torah. Let's switch it. Let's make things crazy. All right? So, as with everything, there's a power to do good with this, or a power to do bad with it. But this is what it comes at this time of year for us, right after Rosh Hashanah, after Yom Kippur, after Sukkot. We're now getting back to a normal kind of a life. What we call in Israel, it's Acharei HaChagim. Everything that you put off and all of these breaks and vacations, that's now over. Now it's time for real life. And when you present yourself with real life, it could very well be that all of your thoughts from Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and all of the great simcha generated from Sukkot and Simchat Torah, all of that then dissipates and you say, okay, back to the old grind. But what we're saying is no. What Mar Cheshvan is supposed to be is that you used all that month of Tishrei as a springboard, and now you look at the reality that you find yourself in and you say, I'll tell you what, that might have been my status quo. That's the way I've been living my life for X amount of time, maybe for 3 years like it was in the time of the Maccabim. However, now that I am in this month of Mar Cheshvan, I know that that reality can be completely changed, and a whole new way of living is now possible. So my friends, and all of you alumni people out there, I say that this is my bracha to you, or my hope, or however you guys say it, is as follows. Listen, you think of something in your life that you should be doing better. You think of something in your life that you should be doing different. And it's something that you always thought cannot be changed. Mar Cheshvan is exactly the month that symbolizes taking something that people assume can never change and actually making a change in that thing. Alrighty, everybody, have a Chodesh Tov, and be good and take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.